Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So today's video is just going to really quickly show you how to replace the track bar on the front of your rig. Now, a lot of these steps apply for the rear of your rig as well, but there's a couple of safety precautions you might want to take, and there's a really good reason why you might want to replace your track bar on your vehicle. So stay tuned, check it out. Make sure you watch the whole videos for some safety recommendations at the end, and let's get to it. Now guys, your track bar's sole job is to keep that axle centered underneath your vehicle. As you lift your vehicle, your track bar needs to stay basically parallel and on the same angle to your drag link. That's why when you do a lift kit, a lot of times it will come, especially the cheaper ones, it will come with a bracket to relocate your track bar on the axle side and raise it just slightly. Now, if you're running big tires and you have enough of a lift, you're definitely going to want an aftermarket track bar. Aftermarket track bars are stronger, they're more adjustable, they just do a better job of keeping that axle under the vehicle. Now, there's a couple of things to look out for. We're going to talk about that after we get underneath the rig, but the first thing that you need to do when replacing your track bar is to take a measurement and make sure that your axle is actually centered underneath the Jeep so you know how to adjust the new one before you put it back in. Let's go over and check out where to measure from. So basically, you just want a trusty tape measure, nothing fancy, okay? My Jeep, because I have the tires I do, and because the lift height I do, you're just gonna wanna pick a point off of the frame of the vehicle, okay? Something that isn't movable, right? Something that's attached. I like to use this little ring up here on the top of my spring perch, and I go right off that straight out to the middle of the tire, right here to this point on the tire. Now, after I do that, I'm gonna do the exact same point on the other side, and it should be extremely close, if not identical, especially if your tires are facing forward, okay? So you want your tires facing forward, you wanna bounce in the suspension a couple of times, make sure it's nice and settled, take that measurement on both sides, and then we're gonna talk about the adjustments you may have to make. All right, we'll get to those adjustments in just a second, but first, I had to jack up my vehicle in order to gain access to the bolt that held my track bar into the axle bracket. This is my track bar, right? It attaches to the axle over here, and then it attaches to the frame all the way up over there. I'll give you a better view of that in just a second. I had to jack mine up in order to access this bolt down here, okay? My drag link actually blocks that bolt. Now, you may have also noticed that I have a Super Duty Dana 60 out of a F350 pickup truck under my rig. It doesn't matter. If you have a Dana 44, a Dana 30, or an aftermarket axle, it attaches to your frame and it attaches to your axle the exact same way. Once you have the vehicle jacked up, or if you don't have it jacked up, that's fine, right? If you have access to that because of your stock suspension and things like that, if you have access to that bolt, you don't need to jack it up at all, right? I had to raise up this track bar so that I could gain access to that bolt and be able to slide it out with a socket. You're gonna wanna take those out. Before you take those out, okay, now this is very important, you're gonna wanna strap the vehicle so that it does not move. Remember, your track bar's job is to keep that axle centered underneath the vehicle. So without that track bar, your vehicle is sitting on springs and it can flop to one side or the other. And that makes it a little bit harder to get back in place. It also makes it possible while you're sitting underneath it for it to fall over and hit you in the head, right? So you're gonna wanna make sure you strap it. Let's get to that. Guys, I like to use a ratchet strap. And if you take a quick look over here, a ratchet strap does just that. It ratchets and allows you to use the ratcheting action kind of like a socket wrench to actually pull the strap and adjust it, all right? These are very cheap. You can get them at Home Depot, any kind of home improvement store. And they don't have to be rated to that high of a weight rating. So really any ratchet strap you find will do. The reason you're gonna wanna do that, okay, the reason you're gonna wanna do that is because if your axle is not centered, okay, let's say that your axle is a little bit, when you measured it earlier, is a little bit sticking out on the driver's side by, let's say, 3/4 of an inch or a 1/2 inch compared to what it is on the passenger side with those measurements, well, you're going to want to make sure that you pull the vehicle toward the driver's side so that amount decreases, right? If your axle is sticking out, you got to think about that. The axle's on the ground, it's not going to move because of the tires. Your vehicle, the body of your vehicle will when you do not have a track bar in there. So by putting one side of the ratchet strap on your frame and then the other side of the ratchet strap somewhere on your axle, right? Not in a way that it interferes with the track bar. You can then ratchet it and pull the body toward the axle in that corner, right? So if you want to move it, okay, if you want to move the body of the vehicle driver side, you have to attach the ratchet strap on the driver side, on the axle, and then attach it to the passenger side of the body, and it will pull the body toward the driver side of the axle, okay? Opposite is true if you want to go to the other side, right? You would attach your ratchet strap to the driver side frame, and as you ratchet it, it will pull the body toward the passenger side, okay? Now that is how you kind of get it close, and then you just have to take your measurements again once you release your jack, if you used one, and check it all out. But let's get, now that we have this secure and the Jeep is not going to move, let's get that aftermarket track bar out and let's talk about why I'm going to replace it. Okay, so here we have both track bars, all right? Obviously, this one over here is made by Core 4x4 and this one is made by RPM Steering, okay? The Core 4x4 one is the one that I am replacing, and I am replacing it with the RPM Steering. Now, you can see that there is a difference in how the track bar itself is bent and created, okay? There's also some other differences between these two track bars, and I want to quickly talk about them with you guys. If the Core 4x4 track bar looked a little bit bigger in diameter than the RPM Steering, part of that is the color and the shadows, but part of that is because it's also true, okay? RPM Steering makes an amazing track bar. That's why I'm switching to it. Core 4x4 also makes an amazing track bar. But here's the key difference, okay? Core 4x4's track bar is single adjustable, all right? It just has a polyurethane bushing in there, okay? Whereas RPM Steering is adjustable on both sides with a greasable Johnny joint. But here are the actual measurable differences, okay? The RPM Steering track bar, all right, is a little bit thinner in diameter. We're talking 1 3/8 inches, okay? So it's almost 1.5 inches. Whereas the Core 4x4 is 1.5 inches. So almost the same, but not the same, a little bit smaller. Same thing with the wall thickness of the DOM tubing that it is made out of. They're both DOM tubing, super strong. And the Core 4x4 is 5/16 thick, which when you convert that to a decimal, which is usually how they measure wall thickness, that's a 0.312 wall thickness, whereas the RPM Steering is 0.281. Now, they're both thicker than quarter, okay? Quarter is pretty standard. So they're both really, really solid options, and they're so close to each other that the strength measurement is almost negligible, right? But again, the RPM Steering is slightly smaller, which you would think would make it slightly weaker, but having it be double adjustable and not having a bushing, okay, on the one side is huge. Here's why. Okay, so here we have both track bars again, and like I said before, we have a Johnny joint on the RPM Steering on the passenger side, as well as the driver's side. But on the Core 4x4, now keep in mind, Core 4x4 offers different tier levels. You can get a bushing on their tier 3, or you can go to their tier 4. Still not double adjustable, but they do put a Johnny joint in this side, not a bushing. But with that said, again, still not adjustable. Now, the Core 4x4 having a bushing in here, and you saw earlier the way that it was curved, right? It's different than the RPM Steering. The reason they curve it differently is because this track bar is definitely designed for a factory Dana 30 or Dana 44. I chose back in the day to get this one with a bushing in it because I never planned on 1-ton swapping and I never planned on running 40s, right? Guilty, I'm that guy. I was like, 35s are fine for me. Yeah, here we are on 40s, right? Ton swap, 3-link long arms, crazy. But to get back to it, this bushing does cause some availability or some ability to have the track bar absorb some road vibration because there's a bushing, right? It's not as firm as a Johnny joint, but it also doesn't do as well with bigger tires and the extra stress and load that gets put on the axle. Not only that, it also doesn't do as well with a bigger axle that weighs almost more than twice as much as a built Dana 44. So with 40s and a Dana 44, they do offer an upgraded bushing for this, which is what this is. When I had the Dana 44 and I was running 38s, I still had play in the bushing, so I replaced it with a bigger one, and it fixed the problem. But I went to 1 tons, I went to 40s, it's just even heavier, I have a lot more suspension flex, and this bushing just started to fail on me very, very quickly. Now, I had the option of replacing this track bar with a tier 4 and getting that Johnny joint in this side as well, but like I said a second ago, it's still welded and not adjustable. So I went with the old trusty RPM steering, which makes a fantastic track bar, and the way they bend it, it will work with a factory axle, but it's also specifically designed to work on a 1 ton with big tires. So if it holds up to that, it'll definitely hold up to your factory one. The first step in reinstalling this is to actually measure it while it's sitting on the ground. If your factory track bar was adjusted correctly, you're gonna wanna, or not factory, but whatever you took off, you're gonna wanna measure from the center of this bolt hole to the center of this bolt hole with a straight tape measure. You don't worry about following the curve. You just want it to be straight. Take that measurement, transfer it to the new one, bolt it back in, and it will fit just like the old one did. However, okay, this is where if your axle was not centered, you're gonna wanna make adjustments. If your axle was too far to the driver's side, that would mean your bar was too short. You'd wanna lengthen it some, put it back in, see if it fits. If your axle was too far to the passenger side, that means your track bar was too long and you'd want to shorten it some to pull it back toward the driver's side. Under here, especially on factory Jeeps, you want to look at your axle side bracket. Now, this bracket is only made of 1/8 inch thick steel on a factory axle. This is a Dana 60. This is made at 1/4 inch, okay? So it's not going to happen here, but this bolt hole down here, okay, can actually oval out. So with the pressure that your track bar puts from the body and the axle, especially when you're off-roading with big tires on a factory axle, if that bolt hole has ovaled out, it gives the bolt a little bit of room to slide back and forth in that hole. And that can cause a little bit of a shimmy in your steering wheel, okay? The track bar can definitely do that, right? If your bushings are failing, things like that. Not quote unquote death wobble. Go see my death wobble video to talk more about it, but that can definitely cause it. It doesn't typically happen on the frame side, but it definitely happens on the axle side all the time. All right, guys, so there you have it, all right? RPM steering track bar reinstalled. As soon as you get it installed, you gotta get down in there, you gotta tighten up your jam nuts. You definitely gotta torque the nut and bolt. About 50 miles or so, maybe sooner, definitely recheck it. And as with anytime you off-road a vehicle with aftermarket parts, constantly be checking your nuts and bolts, make sure they're correct. Again, this track bar is responsible for keeping your axle centered under your vehicle. You don't tighten it, you let it come loose, you don't pay attention, welds break, things like that. Unexpected things that usually don't happen will end your day and someone could get seriously hurt or worse. So make sure you always, always, always maintain your rig. Again, this is how I do it, right? This may not be the textbook way to do it, but this is how it works for me. So if you want to follow this way to do it at your own risk, but this way has always worked for me across numerous vehicles, especially with regular maintenance checks. Now, with that said, a couple of safety things that we should really quickly talk about. When you are jacking up your vehicle, you can see down here, I actually have a piece of wood, a wood block on the jack. Now, not the safest thing, especially if you're not on level ground, chock your tires, all that kind of stuff. I'm not going to teach you how to jack up a vehicle. If you don't know that, you probably shouldn't be changing and setting your own track bar, but there's other videos out there and other ways to learn how to do that. With that said, guys, that's it. Thanks for your support. Make sure you subscribe, like, share the video, tell your friends about the channel. We got a vehicle build starting soon, and go build something.